Hey guys, Brad from SimpleGuitar.com here, and welcome back to another video in the Total Beginner series of videos. Today we are going to be talking about how to read fretboard diagrams for beginners. So a fretboard diagram is another way that we communicate how to play things on the guitar, just like guitar tab or chord diagrams or scale diagrams. But I'll tell you what, your life is going to be easier if you have seen already the videos that I recently did about how to read guitar tab and also about how to read scale diagrams, because fretboard diagrams are basically a combination of guitar tab and scale diagrams. And so they can be used to show anything on the fretboard like chords, scales, arpeggios, etc. Okay, so this is how a fretboard diagram looks. It's basically a snapshot of the guitar neck on its side. This bottom line is your sixth string, your low string. Then you have your A string right here. This is your fourth string, your D string. This is your G string, your third string. And your B string is right here. And this is your first string, your high E string. And so those strings are laid out just like they are in guitar tablature. And just so you know, these black dots that you see on the fretboard are just like your fretboard markers that most guitars have. I know some don't, but most guitars have these. And it just makes it easier to find the 3rd, 5th, 7th, 9th, and 12th frets easily. On a lot of fretboard diagrams, you will also see dots like that so that you can navigate the fretboard a little bit more easily. So just like guitar tab, we have it on its side, and each one of these horizontal lines represents one of your strings, and the vertical lines in the diagram are your frets. And so just like with a scale diagram, when you see dots on the fretboard diagram, the position of what string it's on and what fret it is by is where you're going to place your finger. And usually you're going to see a number in or around that dot telling you which finger to use for that. So let's take a look real quick here. This is what a chord looks like on a fretboard diagram. And so when you're looking at this, you kind of have to know what you're looking at for the most part, because you could interpret this as an arpeggio, or you could look at this as part of a scale, or you could look at this as a chord. And so it's handy to know what you're looking at before you dive into it. In this case, this is just what a standard open G chord looks like on this. And you'll notice that for the strings that are played open, I'm still using open circles at the bottom of those strings. Now, why did I say at the bottom of the strings instead of at the top of the strings? That's because when we're talking about music, most things are in reference to the pitch, meaning how high or how low it is. And since when the strings are open, they are at their lowest sounding point, that would be the bottom of the string. I know, it's crazy. Guitar's backwards. That's how it goes. So let's look at this. This is how a scale would look on here. So it looks a lot like the scale diagrams that we just looked at in another video, but now it's on its side. So you have to look at this a little bit differently, but the same rules apply. So this is your regular everyday A minor pentatonic scale, and just about everybody learns this scale. This is really, really common. But when you're looking at a scale here, the same principles as scale diagrams apply. You're going to start by looking at the lowest note on the lowest sounding string, and that's your starting point. And then you're going to go to the next note and go through all the notes on that string, and then you go to the lowest note on the next string and go through all the notes on that string, and go to the next string, start on the lowest note, and go through all the notes there. And so if you do that, this is just a really handy way for you to look at a snapshot of that entire scale on the fretboard. And the more that you look at these and the more that you use these, the easier it is to visualize these things when you're playing, so that you can find your way around the fretboard more easily. One of the really great things about these fretboard diagrams is how awesome they are, because you can show so much more of the fretboard and map out stuff all across the fretboard. For example, with this scale goes from your 1st fret all the way up to your 10th fret. Sometimes that can be hard, especially if you want to be able to see how the scale would look on the fretboard so that you can visualize where you are going to be playing. You could easily show this in tab, or you could show it in a scale diagram, either way. But for me, at least, and I know for a lot of other people, looking at this on a fretboard diagram so it looks more like it is laid out on the fretboard is a whole lot easier. Now, one of the most useful things that you can do when you're using these fretboard diagrams is whenever you're learning something new, like new scales, new arpeggios, new chords, whatever it is, drawing out your own fretboard diagram with paper and pen, and you map out what you're learning on it, it is so handy. And I'm going to talk about that a lot because this is something that I have my own students do all the time. I've quit printing out scales for them when they're learning a new scale, and instead we talk about how to find the scale on the guitar, and I show them how the scale is built, and then I have them find it on the fretboard, and they have to map it out because they're going to learn it a lot better than if I just print it off and give it to them. Now, one of the other cool things about fretboard diagrams, and this is one of my favorite, is what we've been looking at so far are 12 fret fretboard diagrams. Okay, but this is a 24 fret fretboard diagram. Now, most guitars will have 20 to 22 frets, so this will cover everything for those and all the guitars that go up to 24 frets. There are some guitars that go up and above 24 frets. I have played a 27 fret guitar. It was pretty cool. The cool thing about this is the full range for a lot of guitars. And so you can map stuff out across the entire fretboard. You're not just limited to a shorter range or only 12 frets. So this is an example of all of the D major pentatonic scales mapped out across the fretboard. Well, not all of it, a good chunk of it. There is some that I left out here, but just so that you can see that this is going all the way from your 5th fret on your 5th and 6th strings all the way up to your 19th fret on your 1st and 2nd strings. Big range, a lot easier to show with one of these. So the more that you use fretboard diagrams, and especially as you create your own for things that you learn, the more that you start to visualize how things come together on the fretboard and work together. And so this makes understanding scales and arpeggios and chords and music theory and stuff like that a whole lot easier, because when you especially write it down, you get to visualize it so much more. So when you go to play it on the guitar, you've already kind of embedded how it looks in your brain, and it comes out of your fingers a whole lot easier. Now, I do keep mentioning creating your own fretboard diagrams and writing down what you learned, because the act of writing something out has the same effect on your brain as reading it 7 times. So this is why I stopped printing off scale diagrams for my students and started to have them write them out, because when we mapped out scales and how to do it and they did it themselves, they learn it so much faster and so much deeper that it makes it so much easier for them to understand it and be able to use it. And that's the goal. I mean, you can see scale diagrams like this and they look really technical and complicated, but if you have a good teacher who's breaking it down for you the right way, it's actually pretty simple. And then you can apply it in a really musical way. And we'll talk about that too. Now, unfortunately, sometimes you're going to see someone who creates a fretboard diagram like this and not really give you any reference point to begin with or to understand what's going on here, except maybe a scale name or an arpeggio name or something like that. These are useless without context, because now it's just a bunch of dots on a grid, okay? Sure, this is all of the B minor pentatonic scale across all 24 frets, but that doesn't mean anything by itself. This needs to be broken down into more digestible pieces, and you have to know how to play actual music with it. A lot of guitar players will nerd out on stuff like this and be like, where's all this stuff? And if you can't use it musically and you can't be creative with it, it's pointless. So make sure that when you are learning stuff like this, that you are being creative with it and that you can play actual music with it, because stuff like this with zero reference point of what's going on or what to do with it can just be a waste of time unless you know what's going on with it. In short, fretboard diagrams are one of the best learning tools for learning new scales, arpeggios, and chords, and all sorts of things, because you can map it out across the whole fretboard and see everything, and it helps you visualize things, especially if you write them out yourself. Now, just to show that I practice what I preach, here is a picture from one of my notebooks. This is a bunch of fretboard diagrams that I was writing out, and I really like to use grid paper notebooks, because it makes it really easy to do all the lines quick. And so that's what I like to do. These particular ones, I was mapping out certain scales and marking the root of the scale with a diamond. So I recommend that when you're learning a new scale or a new chord or something like that, that you write it down yourself, whether it's a fretboard diagram or a scale diagram or a chord diagram. Write it out, because that's going to help you internalize it and learn it so much more. So I hope that helps you understand these fretboard diagrams and makes it easy and simple for you, so that when you see these, it's not going to overwhelm you or confuse you, but it's pretty straightforward as long as you kind of know what you're looking at. If you're looking at scales or arpeggios or chords, it makes it pretty straightforward for you to be able to do this. I hope that that helps you guys out with these fretboard diagrams. They are super handy and I love using them. But I have a gift for you at my website, simpleguitar.com/top10. You can go there and get your free guide on the top 10 things to learn on guitar first, which is the top 10 things that I love to teach students really early on when they're starting out playing guitar, so that you can get up and playing real music and having fun right away and soloing and improvising. And heck, I have had students, I had a 9-year-old student just a couple of weeks ago come in, and he's only been doing lessons for a few weeks, and he wrote a song over the week, and it was cool, and that's one of my favorite things. So the stuff in this guide you can use really quick to start writing your own music, to start playing songs that you'll hear on the radio, and it's awesome. So that is at the website, simpleguitar.com/top10, and it's totally free for you. So go get that guide. Have fun when you see these fretboard diagrams. Thanks for liking and subscribing to the channel and helping spread the word. I appreciate it. And I will see you guys in the next video.